September 12th, 1958, 11:47 p.m., Lennox Lounge, Harlem. The room was loud. Smoke, thick laughter, bouncing off the walls, glasses, clinking. Bumpy Johnson sat with his back half-turned, relaxed, smiling like nothing in the world could touch him. 10 feet behind him stood the man who had taken bullets for him for years, his bodyguard, his brother, Big Sam. Sam's hand was inside his coat wrapped around a pistol. His heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might tear through his chest. $50,000, that was the price on Bumpy's head. 5 families, 1 decision, 1 shot. Sam raised the gun aimed at the back of the man who trusted him completely and pulled the trigger. Click. No explosion, no echo. Just a dead, hollow sound that cut through the noise like a knife. The music stopped. Conversations died. The room froze. Bumpy didn't jump. He didn't panic. He slowly turned his head and looked straight into Sam's eyes, calm, almost tired. Then he spoke quietly like he already knew how this moment would end. That click saved Harlem. And if you want to understand why, stay with this story and subscribe, because what happened next never made it into the history books. Bumpy Johnson had known for 3 weeks that the hit was coming. He had known the Italians were desperate. He had known they wouldn't send a stranger. They would send someone close, someone trusted. Someone like Sam. Harlem in 1958 was a pressure cooker. The numbers racket was worth millions, and the 5 families wanted it all. They had tried to scare Bumpy. They had tried to buy him. They had tried to outgun him. Nothing worked because Bumpy didn't rule Harlem with fear alone. He ruled it with loyalty. When families couldn't pay rent, he paid it. When police leaned too hard on black businesses, he made phone calls that made it stop. When outsiders pushed in, Bumpy pushed back harder. The Italians hated that. They didn't understand a king who was protected by his people, so they decided to poison the one relationship Bumpy couldn't. Replace. Sam wasn't weak. He wasn't greedy. He was trapped. His youngest daughter was dying. Tuberculosis hospital bills stacked higher every week. Doctors talked in quiet voices. Sam had already asked Bumpy for help, and Bumpy had given him money, but it wasn't enough. The Italians knew this. They always knew. A black Cadillac pulled up beside Sam weeks earlier. A smooth man got out smiling like he was doing Sam a favor. He talked about loyalty and family, and then he talked about Sam's daughter. He talked about money that could erase the bills. He talked about a future where Sam didn't have to watch his child fade away. All Sam had to do was pull a trigger once. What Sam never knew was that Bumpy had already been told. Bumpy didn't confront him. He didn't threaten him. He didn't fire him. Instead, Bumpy did something colder. He let it play out. He changed the rules quietly. He altered his routine. He switched weapons. He made sure the gun Sam would carry that night wasn't the one Sam thought it was. The click wasn't luck. It was planning. When the sound echoed through the room, Bumpy stood up slowly. The room stayed silent because everyone felt it. This wasn't just a failed hit. This was power on display. Bumpy leaned in close enough that only Sam could hear him. His voice wasn't angry. It was disappointed. He told Sam he understood. He told him he knew about the money, the daughter, the fear. Then he told him something worse. The Italians had played Sam like a piece on a board, and now Sam belonged to Bumpy forever, because Bumpy had just spared his life in front of everyone, and debts like that don't disappear. Sam lowered the gun. His hands were shaking. Harlem watched. The Italians listening would understand the message. You don't touch Bumpy Johnson. You don't turn his people. And if you try, he will see it coming before you even make the call. The room slowly exhaled after the click, but the damage was already done because everyone in Lennox Lounge understood what they had just witnessed. This wasn't chaos. This was control. Bumpy Johnson didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten Sam. He simply nodded once and stepped past him, as if the gun no longer existed. People moved out of his way. Without being asked, Sam stood frozen, knowing that whatever life he had before this moment was over. Bumpy walked to the bar, ordered a drink, and paid for the whole room, because that's how kings closed. Chapters. Without saying a word, he sent a message across Harlem, and beyond, the hit was exposed. The betrayal neutralized. The Italians had failed using their smartest move. That same night, the news traveled fast through back rooms, kitchens, pool halls, and private clubs. The 5 families heard about the clique before midnight, and they understood the implication. Bumpy had known, Bumpy had waited, and Bumpy had turned their weapon into proof of his reach. They didn't just lose a hit, they lost leverage, because now Bumpy knew exactly how far they were willing to go. Sam was taken aside later, not by thugs, not by police, but by one of Bumpy's men, who spoke gently and walked him out the back. Sam expected punishment. He expected a bullet or a beating. Instead, he was driven to a quiet building in Harlem and taken upstairs to an office where Bumpy was already waiting, alone. No guards, no gun on the table. Just 2 men and a truth that couldn't be undone. Bumpy told Sam his daughter would receive the best care money could buy. Doctors would be paid anonymously. Bills erased. Sam would never have to ask again. In return, Sam would disappear. Not die, not run, just vanish from Harlem. No more bodyguard. No more presence. No more chance to be used again. Sam tried to speak but couldn't. Bumpy stopped him with a raised hand and said something that cut deeper than anger. He said, betrayal didn't start. Tonight, it started the moment Sam believed someone else cared more about his family than Bumpy did. That was the lesson. Bumpy let him leave alive, but broken loyal in a way fear could never create. In the weeks that followed, Bumpy made his next move quietly. He didn't retaliate with violence. Instead, he invited representatives from the Italian families to talk neutral ground, clean suits, calm voices. He laid everything out without emotion. He told them he knew their methods, their contacts, their money trails. He told them Harlem would stay independent, but profits could still be shared fairly if they respected the boundary. The difference now was simple. They knew he could see betrayal before it happened. The meeting ended without handshakes but with understanding. From that point forward, the rules changed. Harlem wasn't conquered. It was negotiated under Bumpy's terms. And the story of the clique became a warning, whispered, not shouted. A reminder that Bumpy Johnson didn't just survive hits. He absorbed them, turned them into leverage, and walked away stronger. The bodyguard who tried to kill him never fired a shot, but the sound of that empty click echoed for years because it proved the most dangerous thing in Harlem wasn't a gun. It was a man who planned 3 steps ahead and never let emotion touch the board. After Lennox Lounge, Harlem didn't celebrate, it adjusted. The streets stayed the same, but the balance underneath shifted. Bumpy Johnson stopped moving like a man under siege and started moving like a man who had cleared the board. His routes changed. His meetings shortened. His circle tightened, not out of fear but precision. Every decision now carried the weight of the message sent by that clique. People who worked for him noticed it first. Bumpy spoke less. He listened more. When he asked a question, it wasn't curiosity. It was confirmation. The Italians felt it next. Their collectors started getting delayed calls, missed meetings, quiet refusals from Harlem operators who had once been flexible. Nobody said Bumpy's name. They didn't have to. The power was understood. Big Sam was gone. Not dead, not arrested, just erased. And that silence scared people more than blood ever did. Because in Harlem, disappearance meant order, not chaos. Bumpy replaced Sam not with one man, but with a system. Rotating drivers, split responsibilities, no single point of failure. He treated loyalty like a structure, not a feeling. At the same time, he quietly expanded his protection of the neighborhood. Rent money flowed faster. Police pressure eased. Community leaders found doors opening that had been shut for years. Bumpy wanted everyone to understand the same thing. If you stand with Harlem, Harlem stands with you. And if you betray it, there would be no drama, just removal. The Italians tried once. More not with violence but with influence. Politicians favors pressure from downtown. It didn't stick. Bumpy already had leverage because after the failed hit, certain conversations started happening, quietly. Some people in power didn't want chaos in Harlem. They wanted stability, and Bumpy provided exactly that. Crime stayed controlled, money flowed, predictability replaced war. That made him valuable. By early 1959, the bounty on Bumpy's head was never officially withdrawn, but nobody mentioned it anymore. Hits cost money. Failure costs respect. And after Lennox Lounge, respect was something the five families could no longer afford to lose. The clique had done more than save Bumpy's life. It exposed a truth everyone preferred to ignore. Power wasn't about pulling the trigger. It was about deciding when not to. That night, Bumpy proved he could disarm an enemy without firing a shot and still walk away in control. Harlem remembered it for years, not as a legend told loudly, but as a lesson passed, quietly between men who understood how close everything came to breaking. And somewhere far from New York, Big Sam sat in a clean hospital room, watching his daughter breathe easier, knowing she would. Live carrying a debt he could never repay and a silence he would never break, because the man he tried to kill had spared him, and in doing so had taken everything else. The clique never made the newspapers. It never showed up in court records, but it rewrote the rules of Harlem, and everyone who mattered heard it, even if they pretended they hadn't. Years later, people would argue about what really made Bumpy Johnson untouchable. Some said it was his connection to the Italians. Others said it was fear. Others said it was luck. But the men who were close enough knew better. They knew it was that night and the choice he made when he could have ended everything with one order. Instead, Bumpy used restraint like a weapon. After the clique, no one inside Harlem doubted who was in control, but what mattered more was what happened outside of it. Federal eyes had already been watching Bumpy for years, waiting for a mistake, waiting for violence that could justify a full crackdown. The failed hit gave him something rare. Time, because no war followed, no bodies dropped, no headlines screamed. Mafia bloodbath in Harlem law. Enforcement had nothing to react to. And in that quiet, Bumpy tightened his operation even further. Money moved cleaner. Messages moved slower. Everything became harder to trace. Younger men coming up in Harlem learned a different lesson from the old generation. They learned that power wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It didn't announce itself. It sat still and let other people reveal themselves. Bumpy started testing people the same way he had tested Sam. Small temptations, fake, leaks. Quiet offers passed through third hands. He watched who repeated them, who acted different, who hesitated. Those people were moved out, politely, given other work, or encouraged to leave town. No. Violence. No scenes. Harlem stayed calm, and that calm made Bumpy more dangerous than ever. By the time the 1960s approached, Bumpy Johnson wasn't just a gangster. He was a stabilizing force, and that made him valuable to people who would never say his name in public. Judges, union leaders, business owners all preferred predictable crime to chaotic crime. And Bumpy gave them predictability. The five families adjusted too. They stopped trying to own Harlem and settled for partnering around it, because they had learned the cost of underestimating a man who planned in silence. The clique became a kind of ghost story, told quietly between trusted ears. A reminder that the worst mistake you could make with Bumpy Johnson was thinking you were ahead of him. Big Sam never returned to Harlem. Some said he moved south. Others said he lived under another name. Nobody ever confirmed it. What was confirmed was that his daughter survived, and that was enough for him. Bumpy never spoke about Sam again. Not to threaten, not to justify. because the lesson had already been delivered. That night at Lennox Lounge wasn't about betrayal or mercy. It was about control over the moment when everything could collapse. Bumpy Johnson stood inside that moment, heard the click, and chose the outcome. And Harlem followed that example for years after. Because in a world built on guns and violence, the most powerful sound anyone ever heard was the one that didn't fire. The final consequence of that night didn't arrive quickly. It took years to reveal itself because real power doesn't explode. It settles by the early 1960s. Bumpy Johnson was walking through Harlem, older, heavier, slower, but untouched. He ate in the same places, shook the same hands, and still, no one made a move. Federal agents tried. They always tried. Indictments, wiretaps, informants. But nothing ever lined up clean enough, because after the click, Bumpy stopped relying on trust and started relying on structure. Every relationship had distance. Every favor had witnesses. Every secret had an expiration date. He built an organization that didn't panic when pieces were removed and that made it impossible to decapitate him the way others had fallen. Harlem noticed the difference. Shootings dropped. Turf wars vanished. Not because crime disappeared, but because chaos did. Bumpy understood something most men with guns never learned. Violence attracts attention. Control deflects it. And the city preferred control. Store owners stayed open later. Families felt safer walking at night, even if they never admitted why. Politicians smiled in public and negotiated quietly in private because stability meant votes, and Bumpy delivered stability without asking for credit. The Italians kept their distance. Their respect was real, not friendly, but firm. They had learned that Bumpy Johnson didn't need to win wars. He just needed to make sure no one wanted to start one. And the click remained, the unspoken line. Nobody crossed because it proved something terrifying, that even betrayal couldn't catch him off guard. In 1968, when Bumpy finally collapsed from a heart attack in Harlem, the reaction said everything. Streets filled. Not with fear, but with silence. People stood still as if something essential had been removed. He didn't die in a shootout. He didn't die running. He died standing where he had always stood, protected by a city that remembered what he had protected for them. And only a few men remembered the full truth that his empire had been secured not by bullets, but by one empty sound in a crowded room. Somewhere in that crowd, years earlier, a gun had failed and a man had succeeded. The click that never made the papers, never reached the courts, never entered the official story, had already done its work. It had taught Harlem that real power listens, waits, and decides when the moment arrives. Bumpy Johnson didn't outshoot his enemies that night. He outthought them, and in a world built on noise, the quietest sound of all became the one that saved him and changed Harlem forever.